The latest Transparency International corruption ranking is out, and Nigeria has dropped 3 places, scoring lower than its record in the previous year. The country is now 149th place out of 179 countries, with a corruption perception index of 25 over 100. The low ranking is an indication that corruption is perceived to have worsened in Nigeria within the last year. Let's take a look at this package and come back to talk more about it.
During the briefing, panelists decried the lack of transparency in the Nigerian government, using the mishandling of COVID-19 palliatives as the most recent example.
The COVID-19 pandemic out of Nigeria's responsibility. There has been a lack of transparency in the emergency response of the government. Coupled with the gap in coordination, the process has been fraught by incessant flouting of procurement guidelines, hoarding of relief materials and diversion of these materials, which are then used as personal souvenirs presented to the political party loyalists and close associates.
In cases where government officials have been charged with corruption, many citizens remain skeptical about justice truly being served, due to the lack of transparency by the government.
The infighting and politicizing of the anti-corruption agenda will be evident by the way of suspending the acting chairman of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, Mr. Ibrahim Mago. The accusation that he failed to give a proper account of assets recovered by his agency is questionable, provided no clear legal and policy asset recovery framework exists.
The Nigerian police force was also highlighted as a result of the rampant bribery and corruption that has become a normal occurrence by many Nigerian policemen.
The year 2020 witnessed the EndSARS protest, which saw young people across the nation demanding an end to police brutality and corruption. A factor that led to this protest was widespread bribery and extortion by law enforcement officials, especially the police. The first and second national corruption survey conducted by United Nations Office of Drugs and Crime, UNODC, in partnership with the government's National Bureau of Statistics, NBC, and released in 2017 and 2019, both show that Nigerian police is the institution with the highest prevalence of bribery among the institutions measured.
These are just a few of the examples of corruption in Nigeria's government that were mentioned, with a few recommendations given on how to tackle some of these issues that are stagnating Nigeria's progress.
And of course, the first one for us would be that government needs to, as a matter of urgency, institute a framework that deals with transparency in the utilization of COVID-19 relief fund by state and non-state actors. This must be ensured as a measure and mechanism to rebuild confidence between citizens and the state, because part of what resulted in the anger of the youth and of course ended up as the revolution that we saw in the outcome year is a function of the angst against the state. So citizens have lost confidence. Public servants should be appointed, appraised, and promoted on merits to produce or to reduce the level of nepotism and favoritism. Lopsidedness in appointment increases perception of corruption of the due process. The National Assembly should speed up the deliberation and passage of relevant anti-corruption related laws or amendments to strengthen anti-corruption efforts in the interest of Nigerians. The presidency should assent to these laws once they are passed, while taking into consideration the best interest of citizens.
The Nigerian government has significant strides to make in order to renew the trust of the Nigerian people as well as the global community. Creating laws that address corruption specifically is a step in the right direction. However, implementation of these laws was said to be just as important in the fight against corruption. Wamimo Laleye, Arise News.
Right, and this one?
Well, we got a quick response from the government yesterday to what Transparency had to say. And the government is dismissing the fact. It says it will carry out its own investigation. It also questions what it refers to as the characters behind the organization, Transparency International. It says, on the other hand, that it's a listening and learning government. But I think governance is not easy. You have to learn to take the good, the bad, and the ugly. Nemo Judex, you can't also be a judge in your own court. So when the government says it will also carry out its own findings and it's praising its own self, I mean, it leaves you appalled. What are the reasons given by Transparency International? It says absence of transparency in the COVID-19 pandemic handling. We also what happened. It also says nepotism in public service. It says lack of adequate anti-corruption law and political interference and even enforcement of those laws. And it talks about the prevalence of bribery and extortion in Nigeria police. I think if you ask any average Nigerian about these parameters given by Transparency International, you're most likely to get responses in the negative. Again, it's about perception. And when you get negative perception, then you get rankings such as this. The government has a lot of work to do.
Dr. Bati?
Well, I mean, this happens almost on a yearly basis. This back and forth between the government of Nigeria and Transparency International over what is called the Perception Index. Now, we have had the same ritual again this year. And if you look at the Transparency International Perception Index, Nigeria has been declining consistently since 2016. We were 136 in terms of ranking in 2016. Now, in the 2020 report, we're at 149. And if you look at the rating, it's 25 points out of 100. And on account of that, Transparency International, Nigeria, says, look, Nigeria has not been doing well. However, you know, it is to be expected that the federal government would, of course, say this is not true. And for the first time, I think the response from the federal government was quite detailed and very robust. The standard practice in the past was to just say Transparency International is being sensational. But in the response from the federal government, you will see an attempt to, again, specifically question the data that form the basis of the assessment and the sources. Because if this is based on data, what kind of data? And they also said that there is a Governance Research Institute that has now been asked to take the report by Transparency International and try to analyze how it arrived at that decision. But that in a 2019 report, which Transparency International had released again on Nigeria, that Governance Research Unit observed that most of the data came from businesses, not necessarily the public sector, and that the conclusions were based majorly on the ports, and that in that 2019 report, at least they could use that as a benchmark to establish that it wasn't comprehensive because it was rather selective in terms of its focus. Then, okay, there is also that insinuation that the people involved in Transparency International are forces that are opposed to the Nigerian government. And then, of course, that statement went on to outline what the government has been able to do. The Treasury single account, recoveries by EFCC, the elimination of ghost workers on the federal payroll, even IPs was listed. But however, it's good to see government saying we will take a look at the recommendations. But this should not be an opportunity for politicians to oppose the government and discredit the efforts of government. And I thought that that response, as opposed to what we saw in previous years, is much better. Now, in terms of the recommendations, I think that the federal government should also listen to some of those recommendations because it was not just condemnation. The point about corruption within the security sector. The average Nigeria, in terms of perception, will tell you the Nigeria police is corrupt. Now, in terms of lopsidedness in appointments, a lot of people have been talking about this. Okay, nepotism, a lot of people have been talking about this. There may be some takeaways for government. It's also important that government has an open mind. However, going forward in the future, what we observe is that there doesn't seem to be any synergy between government departments and some of these international bodies that assess Nigeria. Is government itself open to persons looking for data on the basis of which they can make assessments, rather than to have a situation whereby after the report has been issued, then government begins to protest? If there have been prior engagements at various levels of government, perhaps, you know, those doing the assessment will have better information. But I think on the whole, the politicization of which is also something to worry about, because so many critics of government have jumped on this, and they are now using the Transparency International Perception Index as a weapon to attack the federal government. I think people to comment professionally and deeply on the subject should in fact make the effort to study the report first. Yeah. Because I see a lot of people just rely on the headlines and they run with it. Yeah.
All right, that has to be the case and that has to be said. We all collectively work towards the development of our country. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll have Rotus, Michael, Adesua, Aaron to give us updates on Africa, global business, COVID-19, sporting activities. The list goes on. You never know what to expect, but it's all fun and joy and good programming right here on the Rise News channel. We'll be right back. It's a pleasure to have you back. We'll quickly move on to Rotus Odirina. Hi, Rotus, how's it going?
Good morning, Rufai. It's going fine. Good morning to you. Good morning, Doctor. Good morning, Adesoa. We begin with the Nigerian Commodities Exchange. Well, the Central Bank Governor, Godwin Emefiele, was at a press conference yesterday where it was announced that the federal government has approved 50 billion naira investment in the Nigerian Commodities Exchange. What they want to do is to reposition the exchange in order to add liquidity to the agricultural value chain and to essentially reposition the commodities exchange in order to assist farmers. We know we've got a lot of investment that's been made in the agricultural sector. So there are big plans to reposition the Nigerian Commodities Exchange. Now, this exchange has been around since 2001. Initially started out as a stock exchange, and then in, I believe it was August of 2001. No, it started in 1998, actually. 1998, it was set up as a stock exchange in 1998, and then electronic trading started in 2001. Then it was converted to a commodity exchange in, I believe, August of 2001. What they're trying to do is to impact on the value chain. One of the issues that we know all the issues we have. At yesterday's press conference, where an inaugural meeting of the steering committee that's going to be headed by a number of government agencies. The central bank, of course, has, I believe, a 59, almost 60% shareholdings in the ownership stake in the NCX. At this inaugural committee, they are going to look at trying to improve matters in the value chain. And CBN Governor Godwin Emefiele actually talked about the challenges that the agricultural value chain is facing. And we know what these challenges are, which the exchange is going to try to address. The logistics issues, the roads, the storage facilities. Speaking of storage facilities, the federal government is supposed to actually engage the Nigerian Postal Service to use some of their facilities, I guess, that are not being used as warehouses. Because if you remember, we talked about strawberries in Jos a while back, and one of their issues is that they don't have access to markets or buyers. So if you think about commodities exchange, a farmer in Jos who is trying to sell strawberries can, speak with a broker who can now agree to list an X amount of strawberries on the Nigerian Commodities Exchange, and then anyone can now go and say, okay, I'm going to buy from there. So there's price discovery, it adds liquidity and depth to the market. Now, I'm speaking theoretically here because the challenges still remain. Power, storage, the roads, setting up a commodities exchange. I mean, it's one thing. The value chain challenges that still remain in the country is another. So while this is on the right track and the government's head is in the right place, the challenges do remain. So we'll have to see how this goes. As far back as 1989, or was it 1988, there was an interministerial technical committee that wanted to start a futures market for commodities in Nigeria, but the challenges have been in place since then. So we've been going about this for quite a while. We hope that this latest effort from the federal government with this initial seed capital of about 50 billion naira will go a long way. But you need more liquidity, you need more participation, and there's got to be price discovery. There's a long way to go. But we'll see how things work out. To transportation in Lagos, this is something else we've talked about before. Lagos State has announced that they're going to regulate trailer movement. I hope none of you are rolling your eyes. Lagos State Commissioner for Transportation, Dr. Frederick Oladeyinde, at a stakeholders meeting announced that once again they're going to regulate the movement of trailers and trucks between 9 p.m. and 6 a.m. They want to try to do this in order to, as we know, Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu Sanwo-Olu is trying to reduce congestion on the roads, and also accidents, because we know we've heard a lot about trailers tipping over, falling, killing people, and the unnecessary accidents. Again, that's one thing to address. You still got the issues of the roads themselves. And, the traffic congestion is not just trailers that cause them. It's a whole number of other issues. By the way, speaking of traffic, I don't know if anyone's noticed that Okadas are back on Lagos roads. Remember, there was a whole discussion about restricting Okadas and ending operations of ride-hailing services like Opay, MaxNG, and so on, and Gokada. People have talked about seeing Okadas back on the roads, and they are also part of the problem. So you've got a number of issues here. Again, we will see if this renewed attempts to regulate the movement of trailers and trucks at night will go anywhere towards trying to reduce the traffic gridlock. And then to tech, WhatsApp has been on a PR campaign because of the backlash they've received due to them announcing that, wanting to introduce ads on WhatsApp business accounts and then telling people that they will be sharing some information with Facebook in order to create targeted ads. People started, removing, uninstalling their WhatsApp applications. It's mostly in the United States, though, and then moving to Signal and Telegram. But this is a new feature that they've introduced, where they say they're going to introduce biometric access for PCs and laptops. A number of us use WhatsApp on our laptops in order to aid communication with other people while we're working. So this is opt-in. It's not something that is they're going to force people to do. It adds another layer of privacy and security, where you can either using your camera on your laptop, a retinal scan or fingerprint placement, in order to add another layer of authentication to log into your WhatsApp on your laptop. Think about using your laptop and leaving your WhatsApp on there and somebody else being able to access it. So it's just a new thing that they're doing, but it's mostly public relations to try to ensure people that, hey, listen, WhatsApp keeps privacy at the top of their priorities. And that's our update.
Efforts of the Lagos State government to implement or to give teeth to the transportation law of 2018, under which those articulated trucks and trailers were banned at specific times on Lagos roads. Now, what is the guarantee that the failure to actually implement that particular law at that time on a sustainable basis, what are the guarantees that this time around the Lagos State government would succeed in enforcing the rule that those trailers should not be on the road between 9 p.m. and 6 a.m. as they have pointed out now. Now, you'll recall that Apapa, which is a very notorious part of Lagos, the road leading to the port, the trailers have been part of this problem. They park on the roads all the way from Ikorodu Road all the way down towards the ports. We've been having issues with trailers. And the Lagos State government has not been able to enforce its own law. So the main issue is, the promise that is being made now, how will it work? Because truly, those trailers constitute a threat to free movement of vehicles on Lagos roads, and they are particularly notorious. And we've also been told in the Apapa case that there is some kind of collusion involved, that there is some kind of corruption involved, and in any case, those trailers are owned by very powerful business people, and perhaps that's part of the problem that has been identified. And then, of course, beyond all of this is the fact that, look, we just need to be more organized in terms of the transportation network in Lagos. It's a nightmare. Yeah. And you have a multiplicity of transportation police in Lagos. There's one-way unit that the Lagos State Police Commissioner just set up. There is LASMA. There is FRS. All of them working at cross purposes and contributing to the confusion. And the state of those trailers, those trucks, nobody is looking at their roadworthiness. Yeah. And that's part of the problem. Otedola Bridge, there's always a problem there. It's either a truck is collapsing or a tanker is going up in flames and resulting in serious damages. Now, who is going to enforce all of this to make the roads safe and to ensure that the vehicles, the trailers, the trucks are in a roadworthy condition?
Right, Rotus, I am most excited about the commodity exchange. I am most excited. It is long overdue. Nigeria needs it now. to be able to shore up the agricultural sector. I am sad that we started churning out cocoa and some other things. In 73, we had one of the largest cocoa churn out in the world, over close to 400,000 metric tons, and yet we don't have a commodity exchange. We need to have a platform at which we sell this commodity and have this business interaction. So I'm happy, thumbs up to them, and I'm rooting for them on this. Thank you so much.
Private affects, a private commodities exchange. So it's good to have more. So we have one right now.
But the CBN governor was saying those private commodities exchange are involved in arbitrage. Okay. And that's one of the reasons why exactly. They want to sanitize it.
I mean, I'm excited the CBN is doing this, and let's all support this, please. All right. Moving on to business update. Michael Wilson joins us now from London. Oh, we'll go for a quick break, and we'll come back to Michael. All right, we'll go straight to Michael, and we talk to Michael from London. We'll talk about business this morning. Michael, good morning. How are you doing?
Morning, fine, thanks. The rebellion is over. That Reddit lot discovered that their favourite broker, Robinhood, was not quite as beneficent as thought. They stopped trading, and Wall Street sort of came up in arms. Sheriff of Nottingham somewhere in there, if you remember the Robinhood story. You may, you may not. I don't know.
Yeah, I remember.
Okay. I'm sure you do. Okay. Very, very pleased to know your childhood was as misspent as mine. So basically, but there are important lessons about all this, which I'll come on to. Let's do Asia first. Asia markets a mixed day, really, and bearing in mind that and so on, Hang Seng rallied by a half. But the big one is Monday, actually. I think now, which is China releasing its PMIs on Sunday, but it'll carry through into Monday trade, I think. So it could be that if the economy is felt to be doing very well in China, which of course to all extents and purposes it probably is, then that'll be an upside to the beginning of the week. So basically then let's go back to all that Wall Street stuff, US recap, all the noise from Reddit, Robinhood and the rest of them drowned out the data releases in lots of ways. US GDP final quarter 4%. That was okay. A lot of people had been saying that they expected 4.5. Possibly economists did. Market was happy with 4. I said that at the time. I thought it probably would be. My faithful commentator in the Far East assured me that's right. And it's a strange old world, isn't it, where 847,000 jobs lost, i.e. new jobless claims in 1 week, is considered good news. But it does reinforce what the Fed was saying the day before. S&P up about 1%, Nasdaq about 0.5%, Dow Jones up about 1%. So basically what we saw was an end to that mini taper tantrum that we saw yesterday, plus all the Reddit stuff, and the market can now get talking to about slightly bigger issues at hand, like, for example, personal income data, and also there's another one as well coming out today, which is to do with personal spending. But the biggie today might be, as far as the markets are concerned, it might be the Johnson & Johnson drug, expected to release preliminary data. It's only preliminary data on their COVID-1 jab vaccine. Now, I don't need to explain to you why this might be quite a good thing to do. So, kids versus Wall Street then. The story of one of the day traders is quite indicative about this, to be honest. The stock market took a bad tumble in March. So this kid, I say kid, 21-year-old, decided, he should remain nameless, but I've been looking at his story, he should take a more active role in managing his money. So he'd got dual British and American citizenship, no problem about setting up an account with the US trading platform Robinhood, and continued to do so. And what they did was they looked at stocks that the rest of Wall Street had been shorting and decided to buy them. And they made a lot of money in that process. So that's what it is. Kids versus Wall Street. It will happen again. It's social change. It's social media hitting the big investors. But we'll come on to that. Now, EU vaccine shortage. This saga rolls on and on and on. The Germans are now saying that they are not going to be giving vaccine to people who are over 65. I would imagine there's quite a lot of people in Germany over 65 who will not be very pleased with that. Paris is actually halting its first phase of first-time vaccinations, and Lisbon, i.e. Portugal, saying its vaccination program could be slower. Once again, I know there's a big story about this, and I know that you think that the UK is actually sitting on its drugs, but the European Medicines Agency will decide today whether or not the AstraZeneca drug is safe for its constituent 27 countries, not the UK, mind you, because we've been through Brexit. The UK has been using the AstraZeneca vaccine for its mass immunization for weeks now, and no complaints so far. The EU says the firm must honour, this is AstraZeneca, must honour its commitments. Astra is saying, all right, but we haven't signed a contract yet. It's all this stuff going on. So what the bottom line is, we're seeing very, very deep divisions here in a supranational body that is not reacting quickly to the needs of its citizens. That's how I'd put that. EU, bit of a choppy, EU-UK market's a bit of a choppy trade. Again, it'll depend on that vaccine news. I expect slower rollout throughout the EU. That's not helping anybody. Commodities, finally. Speculative long positions on oil have faded out, really, not doing a great deal. Oil's fallen very, very slightly. Gold, well, been absolutely weighted, but silver has come back into its own. Silver tends to rise when the chat goes more to peak oil and electric cars and things like that, of which there has been some. But that's the global view as we speak, as we go into the weekend.
All right, Michael. I want to talk Robin Hood this morning. I want to tell you about my childhood and the long drawn-out story. Wall Street versus the kids. We all know how that ratchet up game shop stocks and the likes. And Robin Hood had to intervene because they were muscled, and underline the word muscled, by Wall Street. But I want to ask, what's the difference? Is that not what Warren Buffett did over the years? Is that not what he did with companies that were close to moribund like Geico and some other companies that he bought and he turned the stock around? Why is it that Warren Buffett can do it, but a bunch of kids can't do it with GameStop? Why is Wall Street so afraid? It's not 1939.
Okay, so what Warren Buffett is not about stock market manipulation. Warren Buffett is about investing in companies that appear to be on the way out. So what he's looking for, his view, is to look for value. What these kids were doing was merely to look at the other side of things, the technical side of things, looking at companies, for better or worse, which were still trading, like GameStop and so on. Not a great company, a little company from Texas and so on. Plenty of rivals in the future. Plenty of rivals right now. What they were doing was merely taking advantage of the fact that Wall Street had shorted their position. In other words, saying that they betted that share price would go down. So the kids piled into it, forcing the share price upwards and upsetting Wall Street financiers' positions. That's all that was happening. Now, this may well happen right now. Will Joe Biden clamp down on social media trading? I doubt it very much indeed. I think a lot of Americans would be saying, hang on a second, this is Main Street coming back to Wall Street, and this is our guerrilla warfare. It's not illegal, perfectly legal, perfectly happy for them to do it. And because Wall Street didn't like it, well, so what?
Well, I mean, we don't have much time. I was going to ask you precisely whether what Robin Hood has done is illegal. But I think yesterday they're going to allow some restricted trading on GameStop and the other 12 companies today. But let's leave Robin Hood. I wanted to ask you about this COVID vaccine fight between the UK and the EU. The First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, has been accused of showboating and trying to curry favour from the EU with a threat to publish the vaccine contracts of the UK to make that available publicly. Now, what kind of favors could she possibly be trying to curry from the EU?
Well, I'm not a political analyst, and all due respect to our Scottish cousins is how I begin by saying that. I'm not sure it's very constructive, actually, for anybody to be stirring the waters here. The real thing is for politicians to grow up, and that's the UK, that's Scotland, that's the EU as well, and say, look, the task before us is to vaccinate people. And what we're seeing is a lot of political advantage being taken from this story. They can do that if they wish, but the the problem is, it won't just be the Robin Hoods of the world, the Robin Hood trading platforms of the world that will be saying, hang on a second, we want our vaccines now. Because I certainly do. And I'm over 70. I think that people, everybody wants this right now as soon as possible. They don't want to see horse trading. They don't want to see political horse trading. They don't care what their governments do or do not believe in. They want the vaccine now so that normal life can continue and we can get back to doing what we do, which is living our lives, which is hugging our friends, which is going out with our friends, which is starting our businesses. That's what we actually want. If politicians are making a bit of hay, well, let them. I have to say, I think it's a pretty crappy game.
Pretty crappy game?
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michael. The vaccine issue, a pretty crappy game at this one?
I would almost say so.
Okay.
Countries at loggerheads, production slow, production plants, developing problems. And you saw that very impromptu, unscheduled visits to the AstraZeneca plant in Belgium yesterday. Well, let's look at the global figures. According to the Johns Hopkins University tally, there are now over 101.4 million cases of the infection. The United States of America tops that list. And yes, there you have it. We still have 2.1 million deaths globally. To Nigeria now, where the country has recorded 864 new infections in the last 24 hours. And for the first time in recent weeks, the Federal Capital Territory is the one pulling the most numbers, with 129 of them yesterday. So far in total, there are now 127,024 confirmed infections in Nigeria and 1,547 deaths. Well, Africa is ramping up vaccine procurement, and the WHO is optimistic that the continent will vaccinate at least 1/3 of its population by the end of this year. Yesterday, the African Union secured an additional 400 million doses of the coronavirus vaccines for its members. It is estimated that Africa will need 1.5 billion vaccine doses to immunize 60% of its 1.3 billion inhabitants, the threshold needed for herd immunity against the virus. We are beginning to see some action in Northern Africa. Morocco, Algeria have started their vaccination campaign. Algeria is to start over the weekend on Saturday, but Morocco has started vaccinating as it received 2 million doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine manufactured by the Serum Institute of India. And then away from Africa to China, where the scientists, WHO scientists, have completed their mandatory quarantine, and they are to begin face-to-face interactions. They are to visit hospitals, labs, and markets in Chinese central city of Wuhan. They will also visit the Wuhan Institute of Virology, and of course the market, the CDC, Wuhan CDC laboratory. According to the WHO. Germany, finally, Germany says the vaccine commission in its country would not recommend the use of AstraZeneca vaccines for older people 65 and above. The panel of scientific experts called the CITCO said the vaccine should only be used for persons aged 18 to 65.
Well, the WHO experts arrived China in Wuhan on January 14. And they went into quarantine for 14 days, and now they are out of quarantine. So today will be the first time they will have face-to-face meetings with the Chinese experts on the other side. And you know that it took a lot of back and forth before they were even allowed to come into China, because the Chinese authorities did not want the kind of oversight that the WHO has been proposing as a way of determining the origin of the virus itself and how the virus jumped from animal to human beings. But a lot will depend on the cooperation that the WHO experts receive from the Chinese scientists. You say they want to have a face-to-face interaction with affected persons and their relatives in Wuhan. But the Chinese authorities are saying they can only interface with Chinese scientists. And there are persons within the Chinese community, the Wuhan community, who have been saying they have something to say and that they are being muzzled by the Chinese authorities. You recall the case of Lin Wenliang, the Chinese doctor that first raised alarm, and then the lady Zhang, the citizen journalist, who was jailed for 4 years because she dared to to speak up. So a lot will depend on China aligning these experts and ensuring that those experts from WHO, they are not used to promote Chinese propaganda. And that's why it is important that they relate with the people, with communities, to be able to get as much information as they require.
Right. Thank you so much for that.